The storm came down like the sky had split open, pouring its anger over the ancient Roman coast with a force that made the earth tremble beneath the crumbling villa perched on the cliff's edge. Wind screamed through broken arches and hollow corridors, carrying the scent of soaked stone, rusted metal, and something far more desperate, fear. The kind of fear a person can't disguise even if they tried. The kind that seeps into the air and lingers like smoke. Inside that decaying structure, where shadows moved quicker than flame, a girl ran for her life. Barefoot. Bleeding. Breath shaking like it hurt her lungs to hold it in. She stumbled down the narrow staircase carved out of limestone, her fingers brushing the rough walls as she tried to steady herself. Her steps left thin streaks of red across the stone, washed almost instantly by water dripping from the ceiling. Every drop felt ice cold, but she didn't dare stop long enough to feel it fully. The storm outside matched the storm inside her, wild, disoriented, impossible to control. Her claws kept flickering in and out, appearing with each flash of lightning that burst through the holes in the roof. They weren't fully formed, half-shifted, trembling, uncontrollable. Her body wasn't obeying her anymore. Panic made everything worse. The more she tried to breathe normally, the more her lungs burned. The more she tried to stay silent, the more her pulse raced like a drumbeat against her ribs. She didn't look back at the attic door she had broken through. She didn't need to. She could still hear the echo of chains hitting the wooden floor behind her. Those chains had held her for years, years of being treated like a caged animal, fed less than scraps, starved until her bones felt hollow. They called her feral. Cursed. Dangerous. They said her bloodline wasn't fit to walk among the Empire's people. That she belonged to the auction pits, one of the condemned creatures displayed under torchlight so the crowds could decide what should be done with her. They never gave her a chance to prove she was anything else. And tonight, when she finally fought hard enough to snap the lock, they'd called it exactly what they always feared. Escape. The villa held around her as she moved. Torches along the corridor flickered violently, threatening to die. Every few steps, the wind punched through the broken shutters, blowing rain across her face. She tasted salt, sea water carried from the cliffs below. The whole building felt like it was tilting under the weight of the storm. Her heart slammed in her chest, begging her to keep going, keep running, keep fighting even though her body was barely holding together. She pressed a hand against the bleeding wound on her arm, trying to keep herself from shaking too much. The blood, dark and unusual, spread quickly across her skin. She hated seeing it. She hated how it reminded her of everything they said she was. Dangerous. Broken. A creature pretending to be human. A crash echoed from above, the heavy attic door being thrown open. Then footsteps. Then shouts. She's out. The cursed girl has escaped. Her stomach dropped. Sweat mixed with the rain on her skin. Her vision blurred for a moment as panic tightened its grip on her throat. She reached the end of the hallway and pushed through a warped wooden door that groaned under the pressure. The moment it opened, the storm hit her full in the face. Rain pelted her skin like needles. The rooftop stretched before her, slanted tiles slick with water, every step a threat. But she had nowhere else to go. Lightning split the sky in a jagged line, illuminating the cliff and the violent waves crashing below. She inhaled sharply, tasting the cold, wild air. For a second, she almost felt free. Then the torches behind her flared with activity. Don't let her get away. She pushed forward, stepping onto the roof even though her legs trembled beneath her. Her toes curled against the wet tiles, trying to find grip. The drop was deadly, but the men behind her were worse. They'd drag her back into that attic, back into the darkness where she would never see daylight again. She couldn't go back. She wouldn't. She slipped once, catching herself with her claws, when they appeared. The moment the lightning faded, they vanished again, leaving her scrambling. She clenched her jaw, trying to will her body to shift properly, but her blood felt like it was boiling and freezing at the same time. She'd never mastered it. They had never let her learn. Voices echoed behind her again, closer now. There. On the roof. She forced herself to move. Rain soaked her hair until it stuck to her cheeks. Her breath came out in sharp, painful bursts that fogged in the cold. Her feet screamed in protest with every step, but she pushed on, slipping, catching herself, trying again. She didn't know where she was going. She just needed distance. She needed time. She needed the hell. It tore out of her chest before she could stop it. A deep, raw sound she had never heard from herself before. It felt like something ancient had been living in her ribs and finally broke free. She slapped a hand over her mouth, horrified at the sound she'd made, but it was too late. The storm seemed to pause for a heartbeat, as if listening. The howl echoed outward, across the rooftops, across the cliffs, across the Roman countryside. It stretched into the night sky, riding the wind with impossible strength. She felt it leaving her, felt the power in it, felt the way it wasn't just noise. It was a call. Her knees weakened. Tears mixed with the rain on her face. She didn't know why that sound hurt so much. It wasn't pain, it was something else. Something she didn't have a name for. It was like loneliness had cracked open inside her and spilled into the world. She pressed her forehead against the cold tiles, trembling from the force of it. That sound, someone would hear it. Not the soldiers. Not the guards. Someone else. The storm shifted. It felt different now. A strange tension hung in the air, like the world had just changed direction without warning. Behind her, the men hesitated. Even they felt it. What was that? One whispered. But she didn't stay to listen. She crawled farther, dragging herself across the slippery edge of the villa roof. She could see a row of lower rooftops connected by old wooden beams, the only path she might survive. She gathered what strength she had left, pushed off with shaking legs, and jumped. The tiles cracked under her landing, but she stayed upright. Her breath hitched. Her vision sparkled with dizziness. She kept moving. Every rooftop brought her farther from the attic, farther from the chains, farther from the hands that held her down. Rain poured over her, washing away blood, dirt, and years of nightmares. The wind whipped her hair behind her, almost lifting her off her feet. Every heartbeat felt like a countdown. A shout rose behind her again. Get her before she reaches the cliff path. Her pulse spiked. She sprinted faster than she thought she could. Her lungs burned. Her body shook. Her claws flashed again, catching on tiles, helping her stay upright. Another boom of thunder cracked through the sky. More shouts. More footsteps. And then, the strangest thing. Silence. Just for a moment. The storm didn't stop, but everything else did. As if the world was holding its breath. She slowed, confused, water dripping from her chin, lungs aching. A heavy pressure settled in the air, pressing against her skin like a hand. She didn't know what it meant. She didn't know someone far away had felt her howl. She didn't know a pair of golden eyes had opened in the darkness miles beyond the cliffs, recognizing a voice they weren't supposed to hear in this lifetime. She only knew she had seconds left before everything around her caught up. Her voice shook as she whispered into the storm, forcing her words out even though fear wrapped around her like vines. Before the guards find me, before the storm swallows me whole. If you can hear my story, subscribe to Sophie's Romance Collections. Don't leave me alone in this darkness. Her foot hit the wooden beam leading to the next roof. It cracked. She gasped. The soldiers roared. The wind surged. The storm opened its jaws wider. And the girl who had been locked away for years, silenced by chains, hunted like an animal, kept running into the night, unaware that her howl had already changed everything. The rain followed her all the way down the cliff path, soaking her to the bone as she stumbled through the darkness. Her body had no strength left, each breath came out sharp, shaky, like her lungs were collapsing in on themselves. Cold mud clung to her legs, slowing her steps. her vision blurred. The storm roared over her head, but her mind felt strangely quiet now, almost hollow. By the time she reached the edge of the ancient Roman marketplace, her legs simply gave out. She collapsed hard onto the rain-flooded stones, the impact knocking the air from her chest. Water splashed around her, mixing with the blood dripping down her arm. Her fingers trembled as she tried to push herself upright, but the effort was too much. Her palms slid on the slick ground, leaving faint red streaks across the stone. The marketplace was deserted. The stalls that once echoed with shouts and trading cries now stood empty, their wooden frames creaking under the weight of the storm. Broken pottery littered the ground. The old auction platforms loomed like skeletons in the dark, great wooden stages where shifters had once been paraded, chained, humiliated, sold. She crawled toward the nearest pillar, her breath shuddering. This pillar, she remembered it. Not from being here, but from nightmares. From stories whispered by guards with cruel smirks. This was where they chained the unclean ones. This was where her future was supposed to end. Thunder rumbled overhead as she pressed her back against the cold stone. She pulled her knees to her chest, hugging herself, trying to keep the shaking under control. Her claws flickered again, half-formed, weak, as if even her power was afraid tonight. Rain dripped from her eyelashes. She blinked, trying to stay conscious, but everything felt heavier by the second. The wind shifted. It wasn't the storm. It was something else. Something moving. Her head snapped up. Instinct reacting before thought could catch up. She squinted into the shadows between the abandoned stalls. At first, she thought it was just darkness gathering into a shape. Then it stepped forward. A man. Tall. Broad-shouldered. Moving with a deadly calm that didn't match the chaos around them. A hood covered most of his face, dripping with rainwater. A cloak made of black wolf fur wrapped around him, swaying with each calculated step he took. And at his hip. A gladius. But not an ordinary one. The blade's surface shimmered with shifting runes that pulsed faintly beneath the stormlight, as if alive. Her stomach tightened. Her palms began to sweat despite the cold. He came closer. Closer. Close enough for her to see his eyes under the hood. They weren't fully human. A faint gold glow lit them from within, steady, watching, too aware. She dragged herself back instinctively, even though she had nowhere left to go. The pillar behind her felt even colder now. Her pulse hammered in her ears. He stopped just a few steps away, the hood casting a shadow across his face. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Only the storm did. Then he said her name. Softly. Like he had known it his whole life. Her breath caught. Her entire body stiffened. She stared at him, rain dripping from her chin. She had never met him. Never seen him. Never heard of him. And yet he spoke her name with such certainty that it rattled something deep inside her chest. Her voice broke when she tried to speak. How do you know? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he circled her slowly, like a predator assessing an injured creature. Or maybe like something else, something older, something bound by instinct he didn't quite trust. She couldn't tell if he was a threat, or the only thing standing between her and destruction. She shivered as he moved. Every shift of his cloak felt deliberate. He didn't rush. He didn't stumble. He didn't even flinch at the storm. It was as if the rain bent around him, refusing to touch him. His golden eyes passed over her wounds, her trembling hands, the half-shifted flicker in her claws. His jaw tightened for a second, as though something about her condition affected him more than he wanted to admit. Then another sound broke through the night. Distant shouts. Boots splashing through water. Torches flaring in the distance. The patrols. Her chest constricted. She pressed herself even harder into the stone pillar, trying to gain strength she didn't have. The hooded man turned his head toward the approaching voices, his expression impossible to read. Then, with a quiet, controlled movement, he positioned himself between her and the direction of the patrol, shielding her. Without a word. Her heart skipped. She didn't trust him. She didn't trust anyone. And yet, something in the way he stood there, like a wall of darkness ready to tear apart anything that came too close, made her pulse slow just a little. She whispered hoarsely, "Why are you helping me?" He lifted his head slightly. The torchlight from a distant patrol caught the edge of his jaw, revealing hints of sharp features, a hint of scar along his cheekbone, the faintest glimmer of danger etched right into the shape of him. When he spoke, his voice was low, rough, powerful, like thunder trapped in a human throat. "I've been waiting for your howl." Her breath hitched. "My, what?" He turned fully toward her now, lowering his hood with a slow, deliberate motion. The rain poured over his face, highlighting the hard lines of his features. His hair was dark and wet, pushed back from his forehead. His eyes, gods, those eyes, glowed with quiet intensity that felt ancient. "It woke the earth," he said. Lightning illuminated the marketplace for a heartbeat, revealing the truth she should have recognized sooner. This man wasn't just a stranger. He was something else. Something more. The Alpha King. The one the Empire whispered about in fear. The one shifters bowed to in silence. The one who ruled the hidden pacts with power old enough to terrify even the Senate. Her pulse spiked. She tried to pull away from him, but her body refused to listen. He took one step closer, not touching her, not reaching for her, just being near. And somehow that alone made the air heavier. She didn't know whether to fear him or cling to him. He didn't know whether to save her or destroy the thing she might become. Their distrust circled the space between them like a living thing. Their breathing synced without meaning to. The storm faded into the background. The world shrank to the few feet of darkness that separated them. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you wait for me?" His gaze lowered, just for a second, before he met her eyes again with raw, restrained honesty. "Because the moment you cried out," he murmured, "something inside me answered." Her chest tightened so sharply she almost gasped. The patrols grew closer. The storm raged on. But none of it mattered as much as the truth settling between them. He had come for her. And for the first time in her life, someone powerful hadn't come to drag her back into darkness, but to pull her out of it. The rain eased only slightly, softening from violent sheets to a cold, steady drizzle that tapped against the ruined stone around them. The marketplace remained deserted, but the emptiness felt heavier now, as though the silence itself was listening. She sat slumped against the half-broken pillar, her breath shallow, her body trembling from exhaustion she could no longer hide. The Alpha King stayed near, not touching, not speaking. Only watching her with that quiet burning gaze that seemed to strip away every defense she tried to hold up. Her fingers curled over the dirt, shaky, almost desperate. The storm above them flickered with distant thunder, but her mind was already drifting far from this empty stretch of Rome. The world around her dissolved, overtaken by the harsh, vivid pull of memory. Even the Alpha's shadow, steady and patient, couldn't keep her anchored. It began with the sound of that attic door slamming. A sound she still heard in her bones. The sharp scrape of old hinges, the heavy drop of iron locking her away, that was where her mind dragged her first. She saw again the narrow room with its splintered beams overhead, the few slivers of moonlight slicing through cracks in the roof. Dust always floated in the air, turning silver whenever lightning flashed. That room smelled of damp wood, mold, and the metallic tang of her own blood from nights she lost control and clawed at whatever she could reach. In those years, her body grew stronger and thinner at the same time. Hunger carved out her ribs while the rage of the shift burned through her veins. The floorboards bore the proof of every night she lost herself, deep gouges, shredded straw, claw marks that no punishment could erase. She remembered the coldness of her stepfamily's footsteps when they came to toss bread through the hatch. They never met her eyes. Never dared. Fear turned them into cowards long before cruelty hardened their faces. She had been the burden they wanted gone, the stain they needed erased before the city judged them for harboring a creature like her. And selling her was easier than defending her. The attic ceiling creaked again in her mind, and suddenly she was back in those nights when she curled her shaking body around herself, fighting the instinct to howl. She would bury her face against her knees, pressing her palms over her mouth while tears slipped silently over her wrists. Loneliness pressed in from every direction until it felt like a weight crushing her chest. There had been no windows. No comfort. No rest. Only the long stretch of darkness and the ache of being forgotten. Her breath hitched now, in the present. Rain dripped from her hair onto her bare shoulders, but she didn't lift her head. She let the memory continue its slow, merciless unraveling. In those early years of imprisonment, she used to imagine voices, soft ones, kind ones, pretending someone was coming to free her. Someone who would open the hatch and look at her not with fear, but recognition. Someone who would call her by her true name. But mornings always proved her wrong. Days passed without footsteps. Nights passed without mercy. She learned to swallow hope like a stone lodged in her throat. Yet even in that darkness, she remembered her first accidental shift. The memory flooded her senses as brutally as it did the night it happened. It had been a cold winter evening, and the house below was filled with tense whispers. Her stepfamily argued in hushed tones about debts, punishments, the governor's threats. Their fear seeped through the wood and infected the air around her. Something inside her snapped under the pressure, like a rope pulled too tightly for too long. Her bones twisted. Her muscle tore. Her breath broke into painful gasps as her hands bent into claws for the first time. She had screamed, a sound that didn't belong to any human throat. The shift ripped through her small body like fire, and she remembered how her vision blurred into gold. The attic walls seemed to pulse like a beating heart, and her senses sharpened until she could hear every frightened whisper from below. When the attic door flew open and her stepbrother stepped inside, she hadn't recognized him. She only saw a threat. Only smelled fear. Only heard the pounding of a human heart too close, too loud. And she lashed out. Not with intention. Not with hatred. But with instinct. Her claws tore into his arm, and a scream filled the house. That moment sealed her fate. From then on, they deemed her dangerous. A curse. A creature unworthy of freedom or compassion. They locked her away tighter. Fed her less. Spoke of her as though she were already dead. In the present, the Alpha King watched her face shift. Saw the way her jaw trembled, the way her eyes glistened with memories she didn't want to carry. He didn't interrupt. He didn't look away. He simply stayed near, anchoring her without ever reaching for her. Her breath shuddered again as another memory dragged her deeper. The marketplace. Not the empty one she sat in now, but the one she remembered from years before, when she had been dragged there in chains. She saw it with brutal clarity. The wooden platforms slick with rain, the iron rings hammered into stone, the broken bodies of shifters too exhausted to stand. She remembered the auctioneer's voice, sharp, greedy, echoing over the murmuring crowd. Shifters weren't sold like people. They were priced in weights of silver, examined with prodding hands, tested like beasts for strength or docility. She remembered the collar around her neck, heavy and cold, burning into her skin where the metal had been etched with suppression runes. Every breath hurt. Every step made her stumble. She remembered falling once, knees hitting the ground so hard she saw stars, and the man holding her chain had yanked it so sharply she thought her throat would tear open. But the worst part wasn't the pain. It was the eyes. Rows of humans and shifters, standing under torches, staring at her with a mixture of disgust and curiosity. No one looked at her with empathy. No one saw the frightened girl behind the trembling body. They saw a thing they could use. A creature they could control. Something to own. She swallowed hard now, her chest tight. The Alpha King shifted closer. Not enough to touch her, but enough that his presence felt like a barrier shielding her from the rain, the cold, and the ghosts clawing their way back from her past. Her memories didn't stop. She remembered the night everything truly broke. The night her stepfamily handed her over willingly, desperate to avoid the governor's punishment for harboring a dangerous shifter. She remembered her stepmother's face, tight, pinched, pretending not to see the tears streaming down her cheeks. She remembered her stepfather refusing to meet her eyes. And she remembered her stepbrother, the same one she had accidentally injured, standing behind them with bandaged arms and eyes full of hatred. "Take her," he had said. As though she were a piece of rotted furniture they no longer needed. And they had. They dragged her up to the auction block. They fastened her collar. They displayed her like a monster. And when no one dared to buy her, not even for the cheapest price, they marked her for the pits. The place where unwanted shifters were thrown to fight or die. That had been her life's trajectory. That was where she was meant to end. Until the storm came tonight. Until the attic door rotted enough for her to break through. Until instinct dragged her onto these rooftops and into this marketplace and into the path of the man who now watched her like a secret he had finally found. Her throat tightened as she drew in a trembling breath. She lifted her gaze slowly, as though each inch cost her something heavy. The Alpha King didn't look away. Rain gathered at the edge of his hood and slid down over his jaw, dripping onto the wolf fur armor he wore. His eyes remained that faint, burning gold, soft, yet unyielding, as though they saw straight through the layers she had built to protect herself. And for the first time, she sensed he wasn't merely observing her. He was grieving with her. Silently. Respectfully. As though her wounds were not burdens, but truths that deserved to be held carefully. Emotion swelled in her chest, too sharp to swallow, too painful to name. Shame twisted into loneliness. Loneliness twisted into anger. Anger twisted into a desperate need to breathe, to speak, to be something other than the cursed girl everyone believed her to be. Her voice, when it came, was barely a whisper. "You don't know what I've done." He stepped closer, his boots making no sound on the stone. The runes on his gladius shifted faintly, pulsing like something alive. His shadow stretched over her trembling form, but his presence felt strangely warm despite the cold storm around them. His voice was low. Rough. Honest. "You are not cursed," he said, each word anchored with quiet conviction. "You were silenced." The sentence hit her like a crack of lightning. Not loud. Not violent. But illuminating, revealing corners of herself she had been too afraid to examine. Silenced. The word echoed through her mind, spreading into the empty spaces left behind by years of shame. Her stepfamily hadn't just locked her away. They had erased her voice. They had stripped her of identity, story, meaning. They had buried her beneath fear until she believed she was nothing more than a danger waiting to happen. And now, here was this man, this Alpha King, speaking to her as though she were someone worth listening to. Worth saving. Worth seeing. He knelt slightly, lowering himself to her eye level without ever reaching for her. His movements were deliberate, controlled, like a guardian approaching a wounded creature who might bolt at the slightest wrong gesture. "You survived what was meant to break you," he said quietly. "That is not a curse. That is strength." Her breath cracked. Her chest tightened with something fierce and frightening. Hope was dangerous. Hope had betrayed her before. Hope had no place in her world. But his voice, steady, grounded, unshaken, felt like an anchor she didn't know she needed. She opened her mouth to speak, but the storm inside her answers first. Images of the attic. The collar. The claw marks. The shame. The hatred. The years lost. The memories piled against her ribs until she thought she would burst. The Alpha sensed it. He shifted closer, the warmth of his presence enveloping her like a cloak she didn't ask for but desperately needed. His gaze softened. Even as the faint gold glow in his irises sharpened, revealing the wolf beneath his skin responding to her turmoil. Your howl reached me, he murmured. It woke the earth. It woke me. Her pulse stumbled. But why me? She breathed. His jaw flexed, the hint of conflict flickering behind his eyes, not anger, but something heavier. Something he wasn't ready to name. Because, he said, voice dropping to a near whisper. You are not the monster they feared. You are the force they tried to bury. She stared at him, rain slipping down her cheeks like the remnants of tears she hadn't let fall. A trembling silence stretched between them. And in that silence, something shifted. Not her body. Her soul. A seed of hope, terrifying but real, took root inside her. A hope she never thought she'd feel again. The descent began in silence. Not the uneasy, fragile sort of silence that follows fear, but the heavy, suspended kind that pulls the world taut, as though the air itself is holding its breath. The Alpha King walked a few steps ahead, his cloak dripping with storm water, his gladius dimming and brightening with each pulse of the runes. She followed, barefoot and trembling, yet drawn forward by an instinct she didn't understand. The ruined marketplace faded behind them until all that remained was the echo of the rain and the faint warmth of the Alpha's presence guiding her through the broken arches of ancient Rome. He did not speak at first. He only glanced over his shoulder occasionally, as if checking to make sure she hadn't vanished into the storm again. Her steps faltered each time, caught between wanting to keep her distance and craving the strange safety that radiated from him with every breath he took. When he finally spoke, his voice rolled low beneath the thunder. There's something you must see. She didn't ask what. Trust was too dangerous a word for her mind to shape, but something deeper. Some instinct older than her fear, urged her to keep walking. They reached the edge of a collapsed structure, where ancient stone columns leaned like tired giants against the darkness. The storm winds thinned here, replaced by a faint warmth rising from the ground. He pushed rubble aside with one hand, revealing a crack in the earth large enough for a person to slip through. A breath of warm air drifted upward, carrying the scent of old ash and something wilder. Like heat trapped in forgotten stone. He motioned for her to follow. Her pulse stumbled. Where are we going? To a place even Rome pretends does not exist. The earth beneath the Colosseum was treacherous and old. Tunnels ran like veins through the ruins, some carved by man, others by something older than any empire. She descended behind him, gripping the rough stone with trembling fingers. Her feet slipped twice, but he caught her without turning. Only shifting his arm back enough for her hand to brush against his wrist for the briefest moment. That tiny contact sent a jolt through her, sharp but not painful. Startling. Awakening. He felt it too. His shoulders tensed, but he didn't pull away. Instead, he guided her deeper into the dark, until the last trace of storm faded behind them and the world became nothing but quiet earth and the distant rumble of a place that seemed to breathe. The tunnel opened suddenly into a massive underground chamber. At first, she thought the torches on the walls were merely ancient and long dead. But when the Alpha stepped across the threshold, the flames burst to life on their own, one after another, casting the cavern in a warm, flickering glow. Her breath caught. The chamber stretched wide beneath the Colosseum's foundations. The ceiling arched high overhead, carved with patterns she couldn't decipher. In the center stood an enormous stone shrine in the shape of a wolf crouched as if guarding something sacred. Its eyes were hollow, yet somehow watchful. Its body was carved with symbols that moved faintly when the firelight touched them. A shiver ran down her spine. This place, her words barely formed, is forbidden to all but the royal bloodline, he finished. And to those the prophecy speaks of. She turned sharply. Prophecy? No. You're mistaken. I'm no one's chosen anything. He studied her face, not with pity, but with a quiet knowledge that unsettled her more than any cage ever had. Come. He approached the shrine. She followed reluctantly, every instinct urging her to turn back, yet something deeper dragging her toward the wolf carved in stone. As she drew close, the air grew warmer, thick with ancient energy, humming beneath her skin like a heartbeat. The Alpha touched the shrine with the flat of his palm. Symbols along its back ignited in gold light, flowing like molten metal through the stone. The wolf's jaws shifted, stone grinding softly. A panel slid aside, revealing a mural carved into the floor below. She gasped. It showed a girl standing beneath two moons, one full, one fractured, howling with her face turned toward the sky. Fire swirled around her feet, not burning her, but rising from her skin as though she were made of flame and shadow intertwined. Around the girl, warriors bowed. Wolves circled her protectively. And at her wrist, a mark glowed brightly. The same mark now faintly pulsed on her own skin. Her hand flew to her wrist, fingers trembling. The mark, one she had always thought a birth defect, a shameful reminder of her difference, now shimmered softly, reacting to the shrine's awakening. "No," she whispered, backing away. "This isn't me. This can't be me." The Alpha moved closer, his steps slow, deliberate, as though approaching a creature moments from bolting. "It has always been you," he said quietly. Her chest tightened painfully. Her voice cracked. "I'm not great. I'm not powerful. I barely survived the attic. I barely survived myself." He stepped into the circle of firelight, letting its glow reveal the expression on his face, firm, steady, unwavering. "You survived because you were meant to." His gaze flicked to her wrist. "The mark woke when the storm did. When your howl broke through your fear. When the world finally heard you." Her breathing turned shallow, her pulse loud in her ears. This prophecy. What does it say?" He turned toward the mural. His hand brushed lightly over the carved flames. "It is called the Child of the Flame. A shifter born under a storm, marked by fire instead of moonlight. A soul carrying both destruction and rebirth." She shook her head. "I don't carry anything but scars." He lowered his hand and looked at her with something she wasn't prepared to face, belief. Genuine, deep belief. "You carry a voice that was silenced," he said softly. "And voices like that are the ones destiny chooses." Her throat tightened. Emotion pressed against the walls she had built inside herself. She forced her gaze away, staring instead at the mural's flames that danced in impossible patterns. "This girl in the prophecy," she whispered. "She looks like she belongs here. Like she's meant to stand where she stands." "You stand where she stood," he murmured. Her breath faltered. He stepped closer. Not touching her, but close enough that she could feel the warmth of him cut through the coldness still clinging to her bones. "You think you were thrown away," he continued. "But you were hidden." She flinched. "Hidden? For what purpose?" "So you could survive long enough to awaken." Her hands curled into fists. "But why me? Why would destiny choose someone broken? Someone dangerous?" He shook his head slowly. "You are not dangerous because of what you are. You are dangerous because of what others feared you could become." Silence draped over them. Heavy. Electric. The torches flickered in unison, as if responding to the tension coiling between them. She stared at the mural again, drawn to the girl beneath the moons. The flame carved around her wasn't wild or destructive. It flowed upward in a controlled, powerful arc, as though she didn't fight her nature, but commanded it. The voice reached her then. Soft. Ancient. Whispering from the carved stone as though threads of time still clung to it. A name she'd never heard, yet felt in her bones. An ancestral name. It brushed against her ear like a warm breath, sending a shiver down her spine so sharp she stumbled. The Alpha caught her arm, firm, steady, and her mark flared bright enough to cast a shadow on the stone. The voice whispered again. She gasped. "Did you hear that?" He didn't answer immediately. His hand tightened around her arm. Protective, not restraining. "What did it say?" he asked. She shook her head, overwhelmed. I don't know. But it feels like it's calling me." His eyes darkened. Not with fear. With certainty. It is, he said. The shrine only awakens when the child of the flame steps inside. Her skin prickled. I'm not. You are. She searched his face, desperate for something to contradict him. He gave her none. Only truth. Only conviction. Only that quiet intensity that made her feel seen for the first time in her life. The voice whispered again, louder now, resonant, warm. Her knees weakened. She pressed a hand to the mural, steadying herself. Firelight danced around her fingers, responding to her touch. The Alpha watched, unmoving. So still he seemed carved from the same stone as the shrine. He spoke softly, as though afraid to break the fragile connection forming around her. You think destiny chooses the strongest, he murmured. But it chooses the silenced. The forgotten. The ones who have suffered enough to carry the weight of power without losing themselves. Her eyes burned. I don't want to be a prophecy, she whispered. I just want to be free. He stepped closer, so close the warmth of his breath touched her cheek. Prophecy is not a chain, he said. It's a doorway. Freedom is what lies on the other side. Her mark flared again, bright, steady, undeniable. And for the first time, she didn't look away from it. She stared at the glowing symbol on her wrist, breath trembling, heart aching, soul awakening in ways she wasn't ready for. But she felt it, like fire slowly unfurling through the darkness that had once suffocated her. The mural's flames rose higher. The shrine pulsed. And the voice whispered her ancestral name again. This time, she whispered it back. Not in fear. In recognition. The feast began like a warning. Not the loud kind. No trumpet blasts, no shouted threats, but the quiet kind that coils through the air before anyone realizes something has gone terribly, irreversibly wrong. The Alpha King felt it first, the moment he and the girl stepped into the marble courtyard lit by hundreds of Roman oil lamps. The flames shivered even though the wind was still. The musicians played their flutes too fast, as if trying to drown out a truth no one wanted to face. And every noble in the courtyard kept glancing toward the emperor's high table, waiting. She felt it too. Her bare feet brushed across mosaics that depicted wolves kneeling before emperors, symbols of submission carved into the bones of the empire. The scent of roasted meat clung to the air, mixing with the sharp tang of spiced wine. Her pulse raced, not from hunger, but from the weight of every stare pressing against her skin. She shrank slightly behind the Alpha King, though she hated herself for doing it. He tilted his head just enough to let her know he noticed. Just enough to remind her she wasn't alone. But the world outside the shrine was not gentle. It did not whisper her name. It did not offer her destiny. It offered something else entirely. Judgment. The gathering was a spectacle, shifters in chains performing in the center of the courtyard while nobles applauded their obedience. Wolves forced to shift mid-dance, their bodies shaking with exhaustion. Young ones pushed into forms too early, too quickly. The emperor sat above them all, draped in scarlet, his gold crown carved with wolf fangs. And beside him stood the dissenters. The ones who had waited for this moment. The ones who wanted her dead. The Alpha King kept his body slightly angled toward her, shielding her from direct view. But the scent of hostility grew thicker with each passing second. The nobles whispered. The chained wolves grew restless. Even the torches seemed uneasy. She tried to breathe through it, but the air was too sharp, too full of memory. The attic. The cages. The marketplace where the condemned were sold. Her chest tightened. Her fingers curled. Her mark throbbed faintly beneath her skin. He noticed that too. Stay close, he murmured, barely moving his lips. She nodded, but the movement drew the wrong eyes. A voice rang across the courtyard. Your Majesty, forgive my interruption. The crowd fell silent. A tall man in deep blue armor stepped forward. A rival Alpha. His gaze was cold, his jaw sharp, his posture that of someone who believed he had already won. He bowed to the emperor, then let his eyes slide toward her like a blade. "I bring urgent news," he said. "The cursed girl you seek stands here among us." The crowd erupted, gasps, murmurs, anger. She froze. The Alpha King did not. He stepped in front of her so sharply the torches flickered. "You dare interrupt the Emperor's feast with lies?" he growled. But the rival Alpha smiled. "Lies? Then let her show us her wrist." Another voice chimed in, smooth, venomous. A woman in Imperial wolf hunter armor stepped out from behind a marble pillar. Her eyes gleamed with hunger, not for food, but for the kill. "We captured the scent of prophecy near the Colosseum," she said, stepping closer. "A scent that matches her." "She smells like fear," another hunter added. "And fear means she's hiding something." The Emperor leaned forward, intrigued. "Let me see the girl." The Alpha King stiffened. "She is under my protection." The rival Alpha laughed. "Then your protection shields a weapon meant to destroy Rome." A ripple of tension moved through the crowd. She took a step back, heart pounding. The courtyard felt too small, too bright, too focused on her. The prophecy's whispers were gone. All that remained was the roar of blood rushing through her ears. The wolf hunter's eyes narrowed. "Show us the mark." A guard reached toward her. Her breath hitched. The Alpha King's hand shot out, gripping the guard's wrist. "Touch her again," he said, voice low and dangerous, "and you lose that hand." The courtyard fell into stunned silence. The Emperor rose from his seat. "You dare threaten my guard in my presence?" The Alpha King didn't flinch. "I dare protect what is mine to protect." The noble elite stiffened. Whispers surged like a tide. "She is the cursed one. The attic criminal. The girl who killed a child. She brings fire. She brings ruin. She must die." The accusations slammed into her, each one carving deeper than the last. She trembled, breath choking in her throat. "I didn't kill anyone," she whispered, though no one cared to hear it. The rival Alpha lifted a trembling boy from behind him, a young shifter with a scar across his arm. "She did this," he said. "Years ago. Uncontrolled. Wild." The crowd hissed. Her knees weakened. "That's not the full story," the Alpha King growled. But no one listened. The wolf hunters fanned out, surrounding them. The rival Alpha's warriors moved closer, hands resting on their blades. The politicos at the Emperor's table leaned forward, eyes gleaming with anticipation of bloodshed. "She lives," a noble declared, "and Rome burns." "She dies," another countered, "and prophecy ends." "Silence her," a third whispered. And then the first blow fell. A hunter lunged. The Alpha King shoved her behind him, gladius flashing. Steel clashed against steel, sparks flying. Wolves in chains growled in panic, straining against their collars. Chaos erupted. Hunters charged. Rival Alphas attacked. Nobles screamed. The Emperor barked orders drowned beneath roars and steel. The Alpha King fought like a storm given shape, powerful, precise, lethal. Every movement was made to protect her. Every strike meant to carve them a path to escape. But she was not ready. Her breath fractured. Her vision blurred. Fear twisted through her like vines. Not because of the enemies, but because the mural's flame still burned inside her, whispering for release. Her mark pulsed wildly, reacting to her panic. She stumbled back, clutching her wrist. "No, no, not here. Not now. Not in front of all these people." She couldn't shift. She couldn't lose control. She couldn't become the monster they believed she was. A rival Alpha grabbed her arm and yanked her forward. "Found her," he shouted. She gasped. Her claws tore free instinctively, slashing across his armor. He roared and shoved her hard. She hit the ground, pain shooting through her spine. Before she could rise, 2 hunters pinned her, forcing her arms behind her. "Hold her," one snarled. "She'll shift." Her chest burned. Her throat tightened. "No," she cried, struggling. "Let me go." Her howl almost broke free, but a hand clamped over her mouth. Across the courtyard, the Alpha King's head snapped toward her, fury igniting in his eyes. "Release her," he roared. He fought harder, but 3 rival alphas crashed into him at once. His gladius flew from his grip. Chains meant for performing wolves were thrown around him, dragging him to his knees. She screamed beneath the hunter's hand, her voice muffled, desperate. "Enough," one noble shouted. "Separate them." The command struck like lightning. Hunters swarmed. The Alpha King was dragged across the courtyard toward the Emperor's private chambers, chains cutting into his skin. He twisted violently, eyes locked on her, fighting with a savagery fueled by something far deeper than duty. She reached for him with everything she had. "Don't," she choked out. "Don't take him." But her wrists were bound in iron cuffs. Hunters kicked her legs out, forcing her down. She clawed at the ground, at the air, at anything she could reach. "No," she screamed. "Please, don't take him." He roared her name, voice raw. The sound tore through the courtyard, and straight through her soul. She fought harder, but she was lifted, carried, pulled in the opposite direction through a stone archway lit by torches. Their eyes met one last time. His full of fury and fear. Hers full of fire and heartbreak. And then the door slammed between them. Cold stone swallowed her cries. Warm torchlight swallowed his. They were ripped apart, forced into different chambers of the Emperor's labyrinthine fortress. Separated. Powerless. Surrounded by enemies. And for the first time since the prophecy awoke, she felt truly alone. "If you want, I can continue immediately with." The catacombs smelled of earth and decay, the air heavy and damp, curling around them like a living thing. Torches flickered along the walls, their light reflecting off the damp stones in wavering pools, casting shadows that danced like ghosts. Every step she took echoed hollowly, a reminder that the world above had no idea she survived, no idea she even existed anymore. The echoes reminded her of the attic, of every corridor she had been trapped in, of every dark corner where fear had once been her only companion. The Alpha King moved ahead, silent but deliberate. His presence was a steadying force, a constant she didn't dare to fully trust yet. Every few steps he glanced back, golden eyes cutting through the darkness, searching for her, not with judgment, but with concern. Her chest tightened at the way his gaze held her, heavy with unspoken promises, heavy with understanding she didn't yet deserve. Finally, he halted near a small alcove. He gestured for her to sit. The stone floor pressed cold and unforgiving beneath her, but she sank down anyway, exhausted from the chase, from the storm, from the endless torrent of memories clawing at her mind. He knelt in front of her, pulling his cloak around him before kneeling beside her. The fabric was rough, but warmer than anything she had felt in years. "You're bleeding," he said, voice low, steady. He produced a strip of cloth from his cloak and knelt close, the heat radiating from him in a way that made her skin prickle. She flinched instinctively, ashamed that she was trembling under his gaze. "I can," she began, but he didn't let her continue. "Not a word," he said. His hands were gentle but firm as he tore the cloth into strips. Every movement was careful, deliberate, yet intimate in a way that made her pulse spike. He pressed the fabric to the deep gash on her forearm. Her teeth caught in her lip, trying not to shiver under his touch. The firelight flickered across his face, highlighting the angles, the shadows, the faint traces of scars she hadn't noticed before. "You've been through too much alone," he said softly. "Let me do this." The words made her chest tighten. She wanted to speak, to refuse, to pull back, but she didn't. She let him wrap her wound. Let him touch her. Let him see her not as a cursed girl, but as a girl who had survived centuries of cruelty and still bore the marks of her own fire. Once the wound was bound, she drew in a shaky breath. She felt exposed, vulnerable, more so than she had in years. The shadows of the catacombs stretched around them like silent witnesses. She realized then that she hadn't let anyone see her like this since the attic. Not even the walls of her prison had known the trembling, fragile parts of her. Not even the emptiness of her cell had held her like this. "I need to tell you something," she whispered, almost afraid of the sound of her own voice. He leaned closer, attentive but patient. "Then tell me." Her hands twisted in her lap. "The first time I shifted, I didn't control it. I hurt someone. A child. I didn't mean to. I barely survived myself. They locked me away because of it. They said I was too dangerous, too wild. I've carried it for years." Her voice broke, swallowed by the damp silence. He didn't flinch. Didn't recoil. His hands rested lightly on his knees, but the heat radiating from him pulled her in closer. The intensity in his eyes softened, not with pity, but with recognition. He understood her confession in a way that made her ache and fear in equal measure. "I've lost control too," he said quietly, almost as a confession. His jaw tightened, his shoulders flexing. "I once lost someone I loved because of it. I thought I failed them, that I had ruined everything. I've lived with that guilt for longer than I can remember." Her throat tightened at the sound of his voice. It was rough, ragged, human. Broken. She felt the weight of his honesty settle over her like a mantle she hadn't known she wanted. "You see," she whispered. Even you lost someone." Her voice cracked, fragile as porcelain. I don't promise anything. I can't. I've survived alone for so long that trusting anyone feels like a risk I can't take." His eyes didn't waver. He leaned closer, the warmth from his body almost unbearable. "I see you. All of you. The fear. The rage. The fire. Everything you've been forced to hide. I see it, and I'm not afraid." Her breath caught. The words wrapped around her chest like a hand she hadn't realized she wanted. Her pulse hammered in her ears. She wanted to look away, to deny the pull between them, but she couldn't. Not fully. The torches flickered, sending shadows dancing across the walls of the catacombs. The space felt small, private, intimate. Every nerve in her body screamed to retreat, but another, deeper part, ancient, feral, urged her to lean in, to let herself feel something she hadn't felt in years: connection. He reached out slowly, hesitating, giving her the chance to retreat. His fingers brushed her jawline. Not pressing, not claiming, just testing. The contact was electric. Her breath hitched, eyes wide with shock. The distance between them seemed to shrink. She could feel the pull of him, raw and undeniable, through the heat of his skin, through the quiet strength of his presence. I can't," she whispered, her voice fragile, desperate. Panic surged through her. The years of imprisonment, the betrayal, the auctions, the endless survival instincts. They screamed at her not to trust, not to lean into this. He didn't press, didn't scold. He only held her gaze, steady, unflinching. "Then don't. Not yet. But know this, I will wait. And I will not leave you. Not for this world, not for fear, not for anything." Her chest tightened so violently she thought she might collapse. The proximity, the intensity of his presence, the unspoken understanding, it was overwhelming. The mark on her wrist pulsed faintly, a reminder of the prophecy, a reminder of the fire she carried inside her. But the fire didn't feel threatening right now. It felt like it was breathing with her, awakening alongside the fragile threads of trust she hadn't allowed anyone to touch in centuries. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. You shouldn't see me like this. Not all of me." "I already do," he murmured, leaning just enough that the warmth of his breath teased her cheek. "And I'm not afraid." The moment stretched, taut with unspoken words, with the dangerous pull of desire tempered by caution. Her body wanted to lean into him, to let go of the walls she had built brick by brick over the years. Her mind screamed against it, telling her she was dangerous, that she would be broken, that she could not allow herself to feel. He shifted slightly closer, slow, deliberate, testing, waiting. "You don't have to promise anything," he said softly. "You just have to be here. Just for this moment, trust me enough to be present." Her throat caught. Her heart hammered. She could feel the heat of his body so close, the quiet strength, the patience, the unwavering gaze that seemed to pierce straight into the parts of her soul she had buried deep. She swallowed hard. Her hands trembled. She wanted, needed, to reach for him, to close the impossible distance, to let herself feel the safety, the understanding, the dangerous pull of connection. He mirrored her hesitation, leaning in, ever so slightly. The torchlight flickered across his face, highlighting the gold in his eyes, the sharp angles of his jaw, the raw strength in the curve of his shoulders. His voice dropped, almost a growl, roughened by something feral beneath the calm. "I will not hurt you. Not unless you allow it. Not unless you want me to." Her breath hitched. The words, the closeness, the heat, the promise of protection. It made something deep inside her ache and flare. Every instinct screamed to let go, to lean in, to give herself permission to feel, to trust. But the memories, the scars, the endless years of betrayal, of cages, of chains, of auction platforms, her claws itched, her muscles tensed, her lungs burned. Panic surged. She could not. She could not let herself fall into this. She recoiled, stumbling backward slightly, breaking the fragile tether of their near connection. He froze, chest rising and falling, eyes still locked on hers. Not with anger, not with disappointment. Only understanding. And something deeper, fiercer, like the heartbeat of a wolf lying dormant just beneath the surface. "It's okay," he murmured, taking a small step back, giving her space. "I understand. I'll wait. Always." Her chest heaved. Her pulse raced. She wanted to scream, to howl, to break through the panic and let herself feel. She wanted to cry, to laugh, to feel something other than fear and survival. But she only breathed, trembling, shaking, the weight of the past pressing against the fragile warmth of the moment they shared. In that silence, in that dimly lit alcove beneath Rome, something shifted between them. Not a kiss, not a promise, not a word spoken aloud, but a bond formed in the quiet, in the understanding, in the shared recognition of survival, pain, and unspoken truth. She looked at him, long and steady, and for the first time in years allowed herself to feel the smallest spark of hope. Not certainty. Not safety. Not love. Just hope. He watched her, golden eyes unblinking, unwavering. And in that gaze she felt the weight of centuries of loneliness lighten slightly. The shadows around them stretched and pulsed with the firelight, echoing the tension, the unspoken words, the forbidden longing that neither dared fully name. "You see me," she whispered. "I see all of you," he replied. And in that confession, raw, unpolished, unyielding, she realized that perhaps, just perhaps, she could survive not only the world, but herself, with him beside her. But even as the moment lingered, she knew the storm above was nothing compared to what was coming. The world was waiting to strike. Enemies lurked. Prophecies hung heavy like chains around her heart. And yet, in this fleeting, fragile sanctuary, she felt something worth holding on to. Something alive. Something dangerous, and beautiful, and hers to claim, or to lose forever. And the catacombs whispered back, ancient and knowing, trust, or leave. She chose to remain. The marketplace was alive with chaos before she even stepped onto the stones. Torches flared like angry suns, casting jagged shadows across the faces of thousands gathered to witness the spectacle. The drums pounded in relentless rhythm, shaking the ground beneath her feet, vibrating through her chest until it felt as though her very bones were thrumming with the weight of anticipation. Crowds roared, voices mingling into a tide of fear and excitement, a wave that threatened to drown her in humiliation and panic. She moved cautiously, trying to stay at the edges of the square, her bare feet cold against the slick stones, her heart hammering like a war drum of its own. The Alpha King was at her side, every muscle in his body taut, every golden eye scanning the throng for threats. He had warned her, stay close, trust him, but the words were fragile against the surge of betrayal that would come. It started with a whisper. A voice from somewhere near the center of the crowd, carrying through the cacophony, slicing through the roar of drums and the crush of bodies. She is here. She froze. Every hair on her neck stiffened. The words were soft, casual, but the intent behind them was venomous. She turned slightly, searching, sensing before seeing the betrayal form in human shape. And then she knew. It was him. Her sibling, the one who had smiled at her once, long ago, before fear and greed had replaced whatever love had existed. His eyes glimmered with triumph and malice both. Look at her, he shouted, voice carrying over the square. The cursed girl. The one they spoke of. The child of the flame. A gasp spread through the crowd like wildfire. Eyes turned toward her. Hands reached, some pointing, some trembling. The heat of shame, of exposure, rose instantly, searing through her like fire. She wanted to vanish, wanted to dissolve into the shadows, but she couldn't. Not here. Not in the open. The Alpha King's hand tightened around hers, anchoring her, holding her upright against the torrent of humiliation. His jaw was set, his eyes flashing gold with fury, but she saw the flicker of hesitation too. The moment tore him apart from the inside out. He wanted to protect her, every instinct screamed it, but the eyes of the Emperor, the Council, the throngs of nobles and soldiers, weighed heavily on him. Every second he wavered was a second the betrayal sank in deeper. Her sibling stepped forward, circling her like a predator savoring the kill. See the mark, he said, gesturing toward the faint glow on her wrist. The mark of prophecy. The one that will bring ruin. The bloodline that cannot be contained. The power that should have been destroyed long ago. The crowd erupted into screams, shouts, and accusations. Chains. Chains for the cursed girl. Death. The empire must be protected. The words collided with her ears, and every syllable drove a knife through her chest. Hands seized her roughly, yanking her forward. Iron cuffs clamped around her wrists, biting into her skin, cutting through the fragile warmth of her veins. She struggled, but the chains were heavy, unforgiving, dragging her back into the shape of the condemned, into the posture of every shifter who had ever been sold, displayed, and forgotten in the auction pits of Rome. The Alpha King moved forward, trying to break through the guards, but he was stopped. The council's decree had drawn invisible lines he dared not cross. The Emperor's gaze locked onto him, a silent command that left him torn between duty and desire, between honor and the woman he had come to see, not as cursed, not as dangerous, but as hers. Her heart shattered in that moment. She looked up at him, eyes wide, searching for the spark of protection she had clung to for so long. But the hesitation in his eyes, the unspoken conflict, sliced deeper than any chains. No, she whispered. Her voice trembled, barely audible above the din of the crowd. Don't leave me here. And then, the howl broke free. It started in her chest, low and ragged, a sound she had tried to hold back for years, a sound that had been silenced by chains, by fear, by imprisonment. The vibration traveled through her lungs, her throat, her very bones, until it erupted into the open air. The ground beneath her feet shuddered, cracks splitting the cobblestones in jagged lines. Dust and debris fell from the surrounding buildings as if the city itself were answering her cry. Dogs barked and wolves howled in the distance, a chorus that echoed her fury, her grief, her pain. The crowd froze, the shouts cut short, replaced by a startled silence that hummed with tension. The Alpha King's eyes widened in shock, awe, and fear. He had heard her howl before, had felt the tremor of power within her, but never like this. Never so raw, so pure, so terrifyingly unrestrained. The chains bit into her wrists, cutting into the skin, but she barely noticed. All that mattered was the roar of her spirit, the explosion of fire and grief and defiance she had carried in silence for so long. The betrayal seared through her heart again, sharper with every beat. She looked at her sibling, at the one who had sold her to the world, and her eyes blazed with fury. The words that came from her lips were not human, they were not fully wolf, not fully girl, but they carried the weight of centuries of pain. You will regret this. The Alpha King's gold eyes glimmered in the torchlight, reflecting not only the fire around them but the storm inside her. He stepped closer despite the officers pressing him back, the chains threatening to keep him at bay. He had to reach her, had to anchor her, had to hold her before the world crushed her completely. "Do not let them take you," he said, his voice low, commanding, filled with a dangerous mix of love and fury. "Not this time. Not ever again." But she shook her head, unable to meet his gaze fully. The humiliation, the rage, the heartbreak, it all burned too hot. She could not allow herself to feel safe, not yet. Not when the world had conspired to break her again, publicly, openly, mercilessly. The rival Alpha who had accompanied her sibling stepped forward, sword drawn, eyes gleaming with anticipation. "She will destroy everything," he said. "And we will be ready." The Alpha King moved like a force of nature. He struck with precision, cutting down the first of the attackers, his gladius a blur of light and steel. Sparks flew as it clashed with iron and bronze. Every move was measured, yet brutal, designed to protect, to shield, to buy her a fraction of a second she didn't realize she needed. She felt it, the pull inside her, the heat, the surge of raw power. The mark on her wrist glowed brighter, responding to the storm of emotion, to the need to survive, to the howl that had torn the city beneath her feet. Her claws flexed involuntarily, the half-shifted form straining against the cage of her human body. "Let me," she whispered through gritted teeth, her voice trembling. "Let me fight." The Alpha King hesitated, a flicker of fear in his golden eyes. "Are you sure?" he asked, almost afraid of the answer. Her nod was sharp, decisive. She would not be powerless again. Not in front of the traitor, not in front of the world, not in front of him. The howl had not been the end. It had been the beginning. And then she shifted. Not fully, not completely, but enough. Her form elongated slightly, muscles coiling, claws extending, eyes reflecting gold in the torchlight, hair bristling with energy. The air around her seemed to vibrate, charged with something ancient, something wild. She roared again, and the sound rolled through the square like thunder, shattering the fragile control the enemies had hoped to impose. People stumbled back, shields raised, weapons shaking. Nobles screamed. Soldiers froze. The Alpha King's gladius was in her line of sight, and he nodded once, almost imperceptibly, signaling trust, partnership, a bond forged in fire and fear. The betrayal had been cruel, sharp, undeniable. The chains, the accusations, the siblings' twisted smile. They had all sought to break her, to claim her power for themselves. But the howl had answered back. The fire inside her had flared against the lies, the cruelty, the oppression. The ground beneath the marketplace continued to tremble. Stone cracked. The shadows of the crowd stretched and warped unnaturally, responding to the pulse of her energy. She was no longer the girl who had been imprisoned, who had begged for survival. She was something else. Something dangerous. Something that even the Alpha King both feared and revered. Her gaze met his once more, and in that look every ounce of betrayal, every shred of heartbreak, every fleeting moment of fear and doubt, was answered with an unspoken promise: "I will not let them take you. Not now. Not ever." But the pain lingered. The knowledge that someone she had once trusted, someone who had been family, had sold her to the world, would echo for years to come. The howl had freed her power, but it had not erased the wound. And as the crowd scattered in fear and awe, she realized something profound: the world would never see her the same way again. Neither would she. The Alpha King moved to her side, hands on her shoulders, steadying her, grounding her even as the fire inside her surged uncontrollably. He whispered, almost softly, "Hold on. You are not alone. Not while I breathe." Her next howl was quieter, more controlled, carrying not just rage, but sorrow, defiance, and the faintest glimmer of hope. The marketplace trembled again, and in that tremor, she understood, this was only the beginning. The chains were heavy, but they would not hold her. The betrayal was deep, but it had not broken her. And the Alpha King, her anchor, her storm, her danger, her desire, was still beside her. The mask had dropped. The world had seen her as cursed, exposed, condemned. But she was not the girl they thought she was. She was fire, and she was rising. And the first crack of the Empire's arrogance had been etched into stone by her howl. The air above the marketplace smelled of ash and blood, a metallic tang that set nerves on fire. The torches flickered violently, whipped by winds that tore through the square like a living thing. Shadows stretched unnaturally, warped and jagged, twisting along the cracked stones, carrying whispers of fear. The crowd had dispersed in the aftermath of her howl, leaving only the silence that throbbed like a heartbeat between rubble and ruin. Then the ground shuddered. A tremor, subtle at first, ran through the stones, and she felt it in her bones. Not the remnants of panic, not the aftershock of her defiance, but something far older, far darker. The ruins beyond the marketplace, the forgotten temples, the cursed aqueducts, they groaned and cracked. Shadow beasts emerged like smoke solidified into muscle and claws, eyes like molten coals, mouths filled with fangs that glimmered in the torchlight. Their movements were fluid, predatory, ancient. Rome itself seemed to exhale in terror. The Imperial Council rushed forward, robes whipping, hands raised, panic etched across every face. "Lead them. Command them. Protect the Empire," they cried at the Alpha King. They demanded action. They demanded order. They demanded power he could not give. Because their eyes had betrayed the truth. Chains still bound her wrists, iron biting into her skin. But those chains, those symbols of every prison, every auction, every betrayal, they meant nothing against what she was becoming. She tugged, she strained, she roared, and with the force of every memory, every heartbreak, every injustice, the iron groaned and cracked. The links shattered like brittle bones under the weight of her wrath. The Alpha King's gaze never left her, wide with awe, fear, and something far more primal. He could not intervene, not yet. The moment was hers. The air seemed to shiver around her as she rose, barefoot on shattered stone, dripping rain and sweat and fury, every heartbeat calling forth the legacy she had been denied for centuries. Silver fire erupted along her arms, coiling and dancing like liquid light. It traced the lines of her veins, igniting every scar, every mark of suffering, every memory of torment, until the glow consumed the damp air around her. Her eyes, molten moons, reflected the chaos, and the shadow beasts recoiled instinctively, their snarls faltering under the raw, unrestrained power. The ground shook violently, cracking open in jagged lines, swallowing parts of the marketplace in thunderous rumbles. Pillars of stone splintered under the force of her transformation. Her wolf form burst forth, towering, primal, glorious and terrifying. Muscles rippled, fur bristled, claws shredded stone, and the air was alive with the voices of her ancestors, thunderous and commanding, echoing across the ruins. She roared. It was no longer a plea. No longer a call for mercy. It was a declaration, a verdict, a reckoning. The shadow beasts faltered, terror flickering in their burning eyes, but they were relentless, claws scratching, fangs flashing, hunger driving them forward. She did not hesitate. She moved with the grace of the hunt, the precision of instinct, and the fury of centuries of oppression. The Alpha King followed her, gladius in hand, but not as her savior. He was a witness, a protector, but she was the storm now, unstoppable and unyielding. Together they moved like fire and steel, but it was her power that defined the battlefield. Every swipe of her claws carved paths of silver flame. Every step cracked stone, shifted the earth, awakened dormant relics buried beneath the ruins, ancient altars, forgotten statues, ceremonial swords, and sacred mosaics thrumming with energy, responding to her essence. And then she saw him. The true villain of this tale. The one who had orchestrated her suffering from shadows, the one who had cursed the lineage, the one who had whispered into the ears of power and greed alike. A Roman general cloaked in ceremonial armor, eyes like cold iron, hands stained with the blood of generations, standing amid the chaos with a calmness that was almost frightening. Behind him, a cadre of loyalists and hidden alphas, the ones who had waited for her rise to destroy her. He smiled. So the little wolf has finally awakened, he said, voice carrying across the square, dripping with disdain. You think yourself more than you are. Do you not understand? You were created for chains. You were born for sacrifice. Her claws flexed, sparks of silver dancing between them, eyes flaring brighter. Her ancestors' voices swelled, a chorus of fury and warning, and the wind whipped into a cyclone around her, lifting debris, hurling dust and rain like jagged knives. I am not your sacrifice, she thundered. I am not your pawn. I am the storm you cannot contain. The shadow beasts lunged, and she tore through them with a fluidity that was terrifying in its precision. Silver fire erupted wherever her claws struck, melting stone and steel alike. Bones cracked, shadows screamed, the air itself shivered. She moved like wind and flame, unstoppable, unbroken, unyielding. The Alpha King fought beside her, gladius flashing, but every moment reminded him that she had surpassed him. He could guide her, fight with her, but he could not wield this power. She was the weapon, the force, the reckoning Rome had never seen. And he loved her for it, revered her for it, feared her for it, because she had taken the pain, the betrayal, the chains, and forged them into something divine and terrible. The Roman general raised a hand, chanting, calling forth a protective ward, invoking curses, calling on ancient magic designed to bind, to control, to extinguish. But her howl shattered it before it could form. A wave of energy burst from her, silver and incandescent, obliterating the ward, splintering the general's altar, and sending him staggering back. The air was alive with the voices of her ancestors, screaming, roaring, guiding. Silver fire coiled around her like serpents of light, striking down enemies who dared approach. The stones of the marketplace shifted, forming jagged barricades and towering spires that moved almost sentiently with her will. Shadow beasts shrieked, fleeing into the cracks they had come from, leaving behind only smoke and echoes. She saw the council cowering atop the steps of the emperor's hall, eyes wide in terror. The Alpha King's voice cut through the chaos, low and commanding. Do not touch her. She is the line we cannot cross. She is the future. But she did not wait for their understanding, did not bend to their fear. She was fire incarnate, and the world around her had become her instrument. Every movement carried devastation and beauty in equal measure. The ground trembled with each step. Pillars crumbled where she passed, rain hissed against silver fire, and her howl, now a symphony of power and defiance, carried through the air, shaking the very foundations of the empire. The Roman general stumbled, regaining his footing, fury burning in his eyes. You think this ends with you? He shouted, raising a blade imbued with forbidden power. You were never meant to survive. She tilted her head, molten eyes locking onto his. I was never meant to survive? She echoed, voice deep, resonant, layered with the power of all who had come before her. I have lived. I have bled. I have been chained, sold, and silenced. And yet, here I stand. I am more than you, more than the empire, more than the fear you wield. I am everything you tried to destroy, and I will rise beyond you. The ground split beneath him, shards of stone erupting like geysers, silver fire spiraling toward the heavens. Winds howled through the marketplace, scattering banners, tossing debris, tearing through the remnants of order. Sacred relics long forgotten awakened in resonance with her power, humming with life, lifting from their resting places to orbit her like celestial guardians. The Alpha King's gladius flashed in tandem with her strikes, a human counterpoint to the supernatural, but it was her presence that commanded the battlefield. The shadows of the night twisted against her, recoiling, dissipating, vanquished by the force of a girl who had been silenced for too long. She advanced on the general, each step measured, deliberate, unyielding. The silver fire leapt from her arms, encircling him, wrapping around his defenses, melting his wards, dissolving the curses he had so carefully woven. Every attempt to resist was met with fury, every strike countered by instinct and ancestral power. "You cannot win," she said, voice echoing with layers of herself, of every shifter silenced before her, of every ancestor who had whispered to her through chains and shadows. "I am not the girl you broke. I am the wolf, the flame, the howl that will never be silenced again." The general fell to his knees as the power surged, the silver fire consuming the ground around him, lifting him like a leaf caught in a storm. He screamed, a raw sound swallowed almost immediately by the roar of her ancestors, by the force of a power that had been denied for centuries. The Alpha King stepped beside her, hand on her shoulder, grounding her, steadying her, but never restraining her. She needed no restraint. She needed no savior. She was unstoppable, untouchable, untamed. And then, with a final, earth-shattering roar, she struck the culmination of her fury. Silver fire erupted from her chest, a beam that cut through the air, smashing through the cursed ruins, scattering the remaining shadow beasts, obliterating the altar, and leaving the general defeated, powerless, and humbled in the wake of her awakening. The wind died. The marketplace fell silent, save for the crackle of silver embers and the faint echoes of her howl reverberating across Rome. Her eyes, molten and radiant, scanned the devastation she had wrought. Her chains were gone. Her betrayal had been avenged. Her power, unbound and raw, shone brighter than any torch or gold. The Alpha King looked at her, awe and something deeper glimmering in his golden gaze. He reached out, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. You are incredible," he whispered. "You've saved everything, yet you've claimed it all for yourself. You are unstoppable." She breathed heavily, silver fire licking the edges of her skin, the voices of her ancestors fading to a hum of approval. For the first time in centuries, she felt complete, not whole in innocence, but whole in power, in identity, in truth. She had claimed herself. The villain lay vanquished. The empire survived. But it had survived because she had chosen to rise, not to beg, not to obey, not to be a pawn. She was flame, she was wolf, she was legacy. And in that moment, amidst the smoke, rubble, and silver light, she understood fully, she was no longer the girl who had been silenced. She was the storm. She was the reckoning. She was unstoppable. The marketplace was silent now, but the silence was thick, almost suffocating. The silver embers from her fury drifted lazily through the air, smoke curling upward in ghostly trails as though reluctant to leave the ruins. Stone pillars leaned at impossible angles, charred and splintered, yet in that devastation, there was beauty, raw, uncontained, alive. She stood barefoot atop the cracked stones, chest heaving, silver fire still licking faintly along her arms, eyes molten moons reflecting the destruction she had wrought and the power she had claimed. The Alpha King stepped forward cautiously, gladius in hand, yet not as a weapon, but as a bridge, a lifeline reaching toward her. His golden eyes, wide and haunted, searched her face for a flicker of the girl he had met, the girl he had saved, the girl who had been silenced for so long. But she was not fully there. Not yet. Something in her had shifted, irrevocably, and it made her untouchable, radiant, and terrifying all at once. She felt him, the warmth of his hand brushing hers, a tether to humanity in the aftermath of her awakening. But instead of reaching for him fully, she stepped back, the motion small, deliberate, yet loaded with unspoken truth. She had risen, yes, but she was not yet tamed. Not by chains, not by betrayal, not by love, and not even by him. Her voice, when it came, was soft, broken, like the edge of a storm whispering over shattered stone. "Would you have chosen me, or feared me too?" The words hung in the air, echoing through the ruins like a spell, a question that was not meant for an answer. Her gaze swept the marketplace, the place where she had once been chained, exposed, humiliated, yet now conquered. The memories of betrayal, the screams, the drums, the chains. They clung to her still, heavy and raw, but they did not bind her. Not anymore. She raised her eyes to the night sky. The moonlight poured over the mountains beyond, casting long, silver shadows across the devastation. Her molten eyes reflected the pale glow, marking her as both fire and wolf, both girl and legend. Her voice, trembling yet firm, carried again, "Am I a savior, or just a girl cursed with too much fire?" The Alpha King remained silent, not because he had no answer, but because no answer could satisfy the moment. No words could bridge the chasm between who she had been forced to be and who she had become. His hand hovered near hers, unspoken desire and caution warring in his chest. The distance between them was a heartbeat, a breath, a reminder that power could both protect and isolate, that love could be a lifeline and a chain simultaneously. She turned slowly, deliberately, toward the mountains. Each step echoed through the hollowed ruins, her silver fire fading into a soft glow, her howl lingering in the air like smoke. The Alpha King followed, careful not to close the space she had carved for herself. There was understanding in his eyes, a recognition that she could not be claimed, tamed, or caged again, not by Rome, not by enemies, not even by him. The wind shifted, brushing her hair across her face, teasing at her resolve. She lifted her head, letting the cool night air fill her lungs, carrying with it the scent of rain, dust, and distant forests. The mountains called to her, a path illuminated by moonlight, a horizon unbound by chains or fear. She was leaving something behind, the ruins, the betrayal, the chains, but taking everything else with her, power, legacy, fury, and the nascent hope that perhaps she could choose her own destiny. The Alpha King's voice came, low, almost reverent. "I will follow, if you let me. But I cannot lead you. Not yet. You are unstoppable." She did not look back. Not yet. The fire of her ancestors hummed along her veins, a quiet song of survival, of triumph, of destiny claimed. Her steps carried her away from the marketplace, each one deliberate, heavy with meaning, light with possibility. She was leaving chains behind and taking herself forward, into legend, into power, into the unknown. She paused at the edge of the mountain path, moonlight illuminating the faint glow of the mark on her wrist. A ripple of wind carried a whisper across the stones. If this story sparked something in your soul, subscribe to Sophie's Romance Collections. Here, we tell tales that burn. The words seemed to merge with the night itself, a promise, a call, a tether between the story and the hearts listening. She did not need to speak them, her presence, her journey, her defiance, spoke for itself. But even in the stillness, the night was not quiet. A low growl reverberated from the shadows behind them, carrying with it an echo of hunger, of something ancient stirring. The dirt beneath their feet shifted slightly, a new symbol glowing faintly, etched by unseen hands, older than Rome itself. A whisper slithered across the ruins, almost inaudible, yet cutting through the tension like a knife. "She is not the only one." Another voice, low, commanding, promising storms yet to come, resonated from the darkness. "The true Alpha hasn't risen yet." She felt it, a ripple of foreboding threading through her blood, a shiver that spoke of battles unclaimed, power yet to be challenged, enemies waiting in silence. The Alpha King stiffened beside her, golden eyes scanning the horizon, aware that their victory, though monumental, was only the opening chapter. The wind stilled entirely, leaving the air electric with anticipation. The mountains ahead glowed under the silver light, unclaimed, untamed, full of promise and peril. She inhaled deeply, letting the night fill her lungs, every fiber of her being thrumming with life, power, and defiance. Her ancestors' voices murmured, fading but present, guiding her toward a destiny that was hers alone to claim. Her claws flexed, barely visible beneath her skin now, a reminder that the wolf within her would always be part of her, fierce and untamed. She raised her head, letting the moonlight trace the lines of her face, the curves of her jaw, the fire in her eyes. The ruins behind her were gone, not in the physical sense, but in spirit. They were reminders of chains broken, betrayals survived, and strength earned. The Alpha King's hand reached again, hesitating in the air, as if he knew the boundary between human connection and reverence for power. He did not touch her. Not yet. She was her own storm. Her own legend. And only when she chose would he be allowed to walk alongside her, not as savior or alpha, but as partner, witness, and anchor in the chaos of what was to come. She began walking toward the mountains, slow at first, deliberate, letting each step echo with meaning. Behind her, shadows shifted, the glow of the prophecy mark pulsing softly, resonating with the power she had claimed. The night seemed to lean forward, curious, waiting, sensing the birth of something ancient, unstoppable, and beautiful. The growl behind them was closer now, a promise rather than a threat, a whisper rather than a roar. The symbol in the dirt pulsed with quiet power, a sign that their journey was only beginning. Rome had survived, the enemies had been vanquished, but the threads of destiny were unraveling in ways they could not yet perceive. Her mind, still echoing with the betrayal, the fire, the rage, began to settle into clarity. The Alpha King followed at a measured distance, silent but unwavering. She didn't need him to lead. She only needed him to understand that whatever lay ahead, they would face it together, or not at all. The mountains loomed, silvered by moonlight, casting long shadows that stretched like fingers across the valley. Each step forward felt like a reclamation, each heartbeat a drum of defiance and hope intertwined. She walked into the unknown, but she carried herself with the certainty of someone who had endured chains, betrayal, and near death, and emerged untamed, unbroken, and unstoppable. And somewhere, in the darkness behind them, in the whisper of wind over stone and ruin, the promise lingered: this isn't over. She is not the only one. The true Alpha hasn't risen yet. The night held its breath as they disappeared into the silver-lit mountains, leaving behind only ruins, echoes, and the lingering fire of a girl who had claimed everything: the storm, the prophecy, the power, and her destiny.